Welcome back. You made it to part two of chapter six of Becoming Supernatural. And here we're going to meet a man named Daniel. His life was being overtaken by electromagnetic hypersensitivity. And this was more than just discomfort, it was debilitating. He couldn't even walk past a wireless router without feeling sick. And yet, by applying the work, his body transformed. But here's what stood out to me. Daniel's healing began when he decided that he was no longer going to identify as a victim of his circumstances. And that decision required one thing: worth. Let's get into it. Daniel deals with electromagnetic hypersensitivity. About 5 years ago, Daniel was, as he put it, a crazy, stressed out Israeli entrepreneur in his mid 20s who pushed himself daily to work at full power all the way to build a successful business. Working 60-hour weeks was typical for him. One day, while he was raging and yelling at the top of his lungs at a client over the phone, he felt something pop in the right side of his head and he lost consciousness. When he woke, he wasn't sure what had happened or how long he had been out, but he had the worst headache of his life. He hoped resting would help it go away, but it didn't. Mysteriously, his pain increased exponentially whenever he was near anything that emitted electromagnetic frequencies, including cell phones, laptops, video displays, microphones, cameras, Wi Fi networks, and cell towers. If someone near him answered a cell phone, Daniel felt it. He never before experienced anything like this. In fact, he had previously worked in the computer field and never felt any ill effects from being around electromagnetic equipment of any kind. Daniel saw several different doctors and specialists, but none of them could find anything wrong with him. He went through an extensive battery of blood tests, brain scans, and physical examinations, but every one of the studies came back negative. Some of the doctors didn't believe him and even became condescending, rolling their eyes as if Daniel were making up his symptoms. Some wanted to give him antidepressants, but he wouldn't take them. They told him his pain was all in his head, which of course it was, but not in the way that doctors meant. Then Daniel started seeing holistic doctors who suspected he had developed a rare condition called electromagnetic hypersensitivity, EHS. While the existence of EHS is still controversial in the medical community, the World Health Organization recognizes the condition. The mechanism of EHS remains unknown, but when you consider that the brain is 78% water and that water containing minerals such as those commonly found in the body, including calcium and magnesium, conducts electricity, I'm sorry, you can see that for EHS sensitive people, that natural electromagnetic charge might somehow become amplified around things that signal and emit electromagnetic radiation. Like many others with EHS, Daniel also experienced chronic pain and fatigue in addition to his headaches. He'd sleep for 12 hours and still wake up exhausted. One of the holistic doctors suggested he take 40 nutritional supplements a day to combat ill effects, but the supplements didn't help. He was still in near constant agony. Before long, Daniel had to close his business. He went into debt and lost everything he had worked so hard to acquire. Finally, he declared bankruptcy and had to move in with his mother. Now, that's a lot for some people, especially someone who's tasted success. I basically retreated from my life, he told me. I was a zombie because I couldn't think, I couldn't focus, I couldn't do anything. Nothing I did helped, and whenever I got anywhere near the real world, I got really strong headache. In fact, Daniel told me that if he was ever near anything that emitted a signal, his headaches would be 1,000 times worse, to the point that he would emotionally break down. Daniel spent most of his time curled up in a ball on his bed, in his tiny room in his mother's house, crying from the pain. I was wasting my life, he said, watching all my friends get married, have children, get promoted, buy houses, everything. When he began to feel suicidal, his friends and family pushed him to try to find something that would help. Because of the chronic fatigue, depression, and severe pain, Daniel had only about a half an hour of energy each day, so he started to use that time to find something that might help his condition. 3 years after his symptoms began, he read my book, You Are the Placebo. Something clicked. He told me when I met him in a workshop I recently gave. I knew this was the solution. So he started doing the changing beliefs and perceptions meditation I talk about in that book. Very gradually over time, Daniel felt less pain, so he kept doing the meditation. After a while, he discovered my blessing of the energy centers meditation and he started doing that. The very first time I did it, Daniel told me, something happened that I didn't know how to explain. When he got to the sixth energy center, he said it was like a light show was going on in his head. He saw different areas of the brain that had been shut down suddenly started lighting up and communicating with each other. Then a huge beam of what he described as loving light shot out of the top of his head. His inward experience in that moment was more real than the memory of the past experience, which had created the pain in the first place. From that point on, Daniel noticed a significant change. After meditating, he would have 10 minutes without any pain at all. The pain free periods kept getting longer and longer until a few months later, he was pain free. Then he got the idea that he should use the meditations to change his internal state while he was exposed to the electromagnetic fields that had been making him so sick. So he started meditating in front of his cell phone and laptop. It was painful at first, but just as before, he'd eventually feel free of pain after meditating. And then those pain free periods kept getting longer and longer as time wore on. Finally, Daniel was ready to take another big step. He hired a desk, he hired a desk in a shared office space he hired a desk in a shared office space and decided to just sit there and meditate, surrounded by Wi Fi, computers, microwaves, and all sorts of electromagnetic frequencies. So, in other words, he rented a workspace. I don't know why he said he hired a desk. Anyways, although the first few weeks were difficult, he found that it became easier as time wore on. After a while, he was meditating in that environment without pain for 5 hours a day. Eventually, his headaches just disappeared, and so did all of his chronic pain and fatigue. Today, Daniel considers himself 100% healed. He went back to work and got out of debt. Here's the kicker. Daniel works only about an hour to an hour and a half a day, and he's making way more money than he was when he was stressed out and trying to force his life into working the way he wanted it to. He's also truly enjoying life. That was an interesting turn of events. So he went from depressed and retreating from life to being fully in his life, working much less, but having more success than he did when he was hustling. Mhm. Daniel's story reminds us that coherence starts the moment that we say, I am not my diagnosis. I am not my pain. I am not the identity that I've carried. He turned into a version of himself that already knew freedom, and his body followed. What would happen if you started treating your healing as inevitable just because you're worthy of it? Great question. But I want to see you in part three, where we'll share Jennifer's story in sickness and in health. See you in the next video.